The Ferrari screeched to a halt inches from her legs, and Sophie James felt her heart slam against her ribs as she stumbled backward, coffee splashing across her white blouse. The driver's door flew open, and a man in an impeccable charcoal suit stepped out, his jaw tight with what looked like barely contained frustration at the world, not at her. "Are you hurt?" His voice was deep, commanding, the kind that probably made boardrooms fall silent. Sophie looked down at her ruined shirt, then at the portfolio of architectural drawings now scattered across the wet Manhattan street. "I'm fine. My designs aren't." He was already moving, crouching in his expensive suit to gather the papers before the morning traffic could destroy them completely. She watched, stunned, as this stranger carefully collected each sheet, shaking off the water droplets with surprising gentleness. When he stood, she got her first real look at him. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that were an impossible shade of gray-green, and a presence that seemed to take up more space than his 6-foot frame should allow. "I'm sorry," he said, handing her the slightly damp stack. "I wasn't paying attention." Clearly. Sophie tried to sound annoyed, but her hands were shaking from the adrenaline. "Do you always drive like you own the streets?" Something flickered in his expression. "Sometimes I forget I don't own everything." Before she could respond to that strange comment, he pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card along with several $100 bills. "For the shirt, and whatever else needs replacing." Sophie stared at the money, then at the card. "Ethan Hunt, Chief Executive Officer, Hunt Architectural Development." Her stomach dropped. She'd been on her way to interview at his company. This was the CEO. The man whose reputation for transforming city skylines was matched only by his reputation for being impossibly demanding and completely married to his work. "I can't accept this," she said, trying to hand the cash back. "And I definitely can't accept it from you." His brow furrowed. "Why not?" "Because I have an interview at your company in 30 minutes, and this would be incredibly inappropriate." For the first time, something that might have been amusement touched his features. "You're Sophie James, the designer from Portland. You know who I am." "I know every candidate we interview. Your sustainable housing project caught my attention. You think buildings should serve communities, not egos." He glanced at his watch, a subtle piece that probably cost more than her rent. "Get in. I'll drive you. You can't show up looking like that." "I'm not getting in a car with a man who almost ran me over." "I didn't almost run you over. You walked out without looking." Sophie's cheeks flushed because he was partially right. She'd been distracted, reviewing her talking points, not paying attention to the light. "Fine. Half my fault. I still need to get to your office. Which is why I'm offering you a ride, and a detour to buy a new shirt." When she hesitated, he added, "Consider it a professional courtesy. I'd hate for you to miss the interview because of my driving." Against her better judgment, Sophie found herself sliding into the passenger seat of the Ferrari. The interior smelled like leather and something subtle and expensive. Ethan navigated back into traffic with considerably more care than before, and she noticed his hands on the steering wheel were steady, confident, marked with a thin white scar across his left knuckles. "How'd you get that?" she asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. He glanced at the scar. "Boxing. I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't work. Turns out I'm not as good at reading punches as I am at reading building codes." Despite everything, Sophie smiled. "You box 3 times a week. It's the only time my mind actually stops racing." He pulled up in front of a boutique that she definitely couldn't afford. "Wait here. I can buy my own shirt." "I'm sure you can, but we're on a schedule now and I know the owner. It'll be faster." He was gone before she could argue, disappearing into the store with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he approached everything in life the same way, decisively and without hesitation. Sophie sat in the expensive car, watching people on the sidewalk crane their necks to look at the vehicle, and wondered what she'd stumbled into. Ethan returned 8 minutes later with a bag from the boutique. Inside was a silk blouse in a soft cream color, elegant and professional with the tag still attached. It was perfect. It was also probably $300. "There's a coffee shop around the corner with a bathroom," he said. "Change there, I'll wait." The morning had taken on a surreal quality. 20 minutes ago, she'd been a nervous candidate preparing for the biggest interview of her career. Now she was taking wardrobe assistance from the CEO himself. She changed quickly in the coffee shop bathroom, stuffing her ruined shirt into her bag. The new blouse fit like it had been made for her, and she wondered briefly if that was luck or if Ethan Hunt was just that observant. When she returned to the car, he had 2 coffees waiting. "Black, right? Based on what you were drinking before most of it ended up on your clothes." "Good memory." "Necessary in my line of work." He handed her the cup, and their fingers brushed for a moment. The contact was brief but sent an unexpected jolt through her. "We have 12 minutes. Are you ready?" "To be interviewed by the man I nearly got into a traffic accident with?" "Absolutely not." "I won't be interviewing you. That's what my team is for, but I will sit in if you don't mind." Sophie minded very much, but she was hardly in a position to say so. "It's your company." They arrived at Hunt Architectural Development with 6 minutes to spare. The building itself was a masterpiece of modern design, all glass and clean lines, with vertical gardens climbing 3 stories of the interior atrium. Sophie had studied this building in school. Seeing it in person, understanding the way natural light played through the space, the way the greenery brought life into what could have been cold and corporate, she felt her breath catch. "You designed this," she said, 5 years ago. "My first major project after taking over the company from my father." There was something in his voice, a complexity she didn't understand. "It's incredible. It's functional. Come on." The interview was conducted by 3 senior architects, all of whom seemed genuinely interested in her work. Ethan sat at the end of the conference table, mostly silent, but she felt his attention on her like a physical weight. When they asked about her philosophy on urban development, she forgot to be nervous. Buildings aren't just structures. They're homes, gathering places, markers of memory. When you design something, you're not just thinking about aesthetics or even functionality. You're thinking about the single mother who'll walk through that door after a double shift, the kid who'll play in that courtyard, the elderly couple who'll watch sunsets from that window. Architecture is about people always. If it isn't, you're just building monuments to your own ego. The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the senior architects, a woman named Patricia, smiled. "We'd like to offer you a position on our residential development team. Starting Monday if you're available." Sophie's heart leaped. "I'm available. We'll send over the contract details this afternoon." Patricia glanced at Ethan, who gave a subtle nod. "Welcome to Hunt Architectural Development." The meeting concluded and Sophie floated out of the conference room on a cloud of disbelief and joy. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. In the elevator, alone with Ethan for the first time since arriving, she finally let herself react. "I got the job. You earned it." "Your portfolio spoke for itself." He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "The shirt looks better on you than it did on the mannequin." "Thank you. For everything today. The shirt, the ride, the coffee. The near-death experience really tied it all together." The corner of his mouth lifted. It wasn't quite a smile, but it transformed his serious features into something warmer, more approachable. "Try to avoid stepping in front of moving vehicles for the rest of the week. I'd like my new hire to make it to Monday intact." The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and reality crashed back in. This was her boss, the CEO of the company. Whatever strange connection had sparked between them during the chaos of the morning needed to be firmly ignored. Sophie stepped out, turning back to offer her hand professionally. "Thank you, Mr. Hunt." He took her hand, his grip firm and warm. "Ethan and Sophie, welcome to the team." She walked out of Hunt Architectural Development feeling like her life had just tilted on its axis. The morning had been impossible, surreal, and absolutely not the start she'd expected for her new career. But as she caught the subway back to her apartment, hugging her bag with its ruined shirt and rescued drawings, Sophie couldn't stop smiling. Her roommate, Maya, was home when she arrived, working from their tiny kitchen table on graphic design projects. "How'd it go? Did you wow them with your brilliant mind?" "I got the job. But also, I almost got hit by a car. The CEO bought me a new shirt, and I think I just had the strangest morning of my life." Maya looked up, eyes wide. "Back up. The CEO did what?" Sophie told the whole story and watched Maya's expression shift from shock to concern to something that looked suspiciously like matchmaking scheming. "No," Sophie said firmly. "Whatever you're thinking, no, he's my boss, and he's probably married to his work. You should see him. All intensity and focus and completely untouchable. But he bought you a shirt. He felt responsible for the coffee incident and drove you to the interview. Practicality." Maya leaned back, grinning. "Sure, keep telling yourself that." But as the weekend passed and Monday approached, Sophie couldn't stop thinking about those gray-green eyes and the way Ethan had carefully gathered her drawings from the wet street. There had been something in that gesture, a carefulness that contradicted his intense exterior. She told herself it meant nothing. Monday would bring professional boundaries and appropriate workplace relationships. The strange intimacy of Friday morning would fade into a funny story she'd tell at parties. She was wrong. Monday morning, Sophie arrived at Hunt Architectural Development early, dressed in her best professional attire, determined to make a strong impression. Patricia greeted her warmly and introduced her to the residential development team. 6 talented architects who seemed genuinely excited to have her aboard. The offices were open and collaborative, with drafting tables alongside computer workstations, and that same abundance of natural light she'd noticed in the lobby. "We're currently working on a mixed-income housing project in Brooklyn," Patricia explained, spreading plans across a large table. "The goal is to create affordable housing that doesn't feel cheap. That doesn't segregate residents by income bracket. Your sustainable design background is exactly what we need." Sophie dove into the work, energized by the challenge. The morning flew by in a blur of measurements and material discussions. She didn't see Ethan at all, which she told herself was perfectly fine and exactly what should happen. But at noon, Patricia's assistant appeared at her drafting table. "Mr. Hunt would like to see you in his office." Sophie's stomach flipped. "Did I do something wrong already?" The assistant, a young man with kind eyes, shook his head. "He meets with all new hires personally. It's normal." Ethan's office was on the top floor, behind a door of frosted glass etched with geometric patterns. Sophie knocked, heard his voice call for her to enter, and stepped into a space that took her breath away. The entire back wall was glass, offering a panoramic view of Manhattan. But what caught her attention was the massive drafting table near the window, covered in hand-drawn sketches. In an age of computer design, Ethan Hunt still drew by hand. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. He looked up from his desk, and for a moment something passed between them, a recognition of the strangeness of Friday morning. Then his expression shifted back to professional. "How's your first day?" "Overwhelming in the best way. The Brooklyn project is incredible. It's important to me. I grew up in Brooklyn. Public housing that looked exactly like what it was, a place people landed when they ran out of options. I watched my mother pretend she didn't notice the water damage and the broken elevators. I swore when I had the chance, I'd design something different. The revelation surprised her. The polished CEO in his expensive suit seemed a world away from public housing and struggling families. You don't talk about that in interviews. People prefer the narrative of the privileged son taking over his father's company. It's simpler, cleaner. He stood, moving to the drafting table. But you said architecture is about people. I thought you should know who our people are for this project. Who they've always been for me. Sophie joined him at the table, studying the sketches. They were beautiful, technically precise, but also warm, showing units flooded with light, communal spaces designed for gathering, rooftop gardens and playgrounds. These weren't just buildings. They were homes imagined by someone who understood what a real home should feel like. This is your design, initial concepts. The team has refined them, made them better. But yes, this started with me. He handed her one of the sketches, a detail of a kitchen window. I drew this thinking about my mother, how she used to stand at our kitchen window every morning, drinking coffee, looking out at the city. That window was the only thing she liked about our apartment. So every unit in this project has a kitchen window that actually shows you something worth seeing. The drawing in Sophie's hands felt suddenly precious, weighted with memory and intention. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked in your interview who the buildings are for. I want you to know I ask myself that question every day, and I want everyone on this project to ask it too. His eyes met hers, and the intensity there made her pulse quicken. You said architecture is about the single mother after a double shift. That's who this is for. I want you to help me get it right. Sophie nodded, not trusting her voice. This wasn't the cold, demanding CEO she'd expected. This was someone who carried his past with him, who let it drive him towards something better. It was magnetic and terrifying and completely inappropriate to be feeling any of this for her boss. I'll do my best, she managed. I know you will. That's why you're here. He returned to his desk, and the moment passed, professionalism sliding back into place. Patricia says you have some ideas about the courtyard spaces. I'd like to hear them when you're ready. I'll prepare a presentation. Don't prepare, just talk to me. Friday lunch. Bring sketches if you want, but I'm more interested in your thoughts than a polished pitch. It wasn't a request. Sophie left his office feeling unsteady, like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The man was her boss, her very off-limits, completely inappropriate boss. But he'd shared something real with her, something that felt like trust, and she couldn't pretend it didn't affect her. The week passed in intense work and stolen glances. Sophie caught herself looking toward the elevators whenever they opened, hoping to see Ethan. She noticed when he walked through the residential team space, his stride purposeful, his attention caught by whatever problem needed solving. He stopped once to look at her sketches, leaning over her shoulder to examine a detail on a playground design. Why the climbing wall? He asked. Kids in the city don't always have access to adventure. Every playground I went to growing up was the same, swings and slides, all plastic and safe. I wanted something that felt a little daring, something that said we trust you to climb, to challenge yourself. His hand rested briefly on the table beside hers, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I like it. Keep pushing like that. Then he was gone, moving on to the next thing, leaving Sophie acutely aware that her heart was beating too fast. Friday arrived, and she found herself nervous about the lunch meeting in a way that had nothing to do with work. She'd prepared sketches for the courtyard spaces, designs that incorporated community gardens, flexible gathering areas, and quiet corners for residents who needed solitude. When she arrived at Ethan's office, he had lunch already spread out on the small conference table by the window. "I didn't know what you liked, so I got options," he said, gesturing to containers of Thai food. "Help yourself." They ate and talked about the project, and Sophie relaxed into the conversation, sketching ideas on spare paper as they discussed how to maximize green space while maintaining privacy. Ethan asked questions that showed he'd thought deeply about every aspect of the design and challenged her assumptions in ways that made her ideas stronger. "You're good at this," she said, halfway through lunch, "at making people think harder." "I spent years working for my father, having every idea dismissed or claimed as his own. I learned what not to do as a leader." He set down his fork, leaning back. "When I took over the company, half the staff expected me to be exactly like him. Demanding, dismissive, taking credit for everyone else's work. I had to prove I was different, still proving it, probably." "Is that why you're always here? Patricia mentioned you're usually the first one in and last one out." "Partially. Also because I don't have much else." He said it matter-of-factly, but Sophie heard the loneliness underneath. "This company is what I have. These projects, they matter. They do, but you should have more than work." "Should I?" His eyes locked on hers, and the question felt heavier than it should. "What do you have outside of work, Sophie?" "Not much, honestly. I moved here for this job. My friends are all back in Portland. My roommate's great, but she's busy with her own career. Mostly I explore the city, try new restaurants alone, sketch buildings." She laughed, self-deprecating. "I guess we're both workaholics. Maybe that's not the worst thing to have in common." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Sophie looked away first, focusing on her sketches. "I should get back to the team. Thank you for lunch and for listening to my ideas." "Sophie." His voice stopped her at the door. "This doesn't make sense." She turned back, confused. "What doesn't?" But he shook his head as if he'd thought better of whatever he'd been about to say. "Nothing. I'll see you Monday." The weekend felt long. Sophie tried to distract herself with exploring Brooklyn, walking through neighborhoods and imagining the housing project completed, filled with families and life. But her thoughts kept returning to Ethan, to the way he'd looked at her across the lunch table, to those words he hadn't explained. Monday brought a crisis. The Brooklyn project's primary contractor had pulled out, claiming the budget was unrealistic for what the design required. The residential team gathered in emergency session, tensions high. Patricia looked stressed in a way Sophie hadn't seen before. "We can't compromise the design," Patricia said firmly. "If we start cutting corners, this becomes exactly what Ethan fought against. But without a contractor willing to work within our budget, we're dead in the water." The meeting broke up without resolution, everyone tasked with finding solutions. Sophie stayed late, poring over the plans, trying to find ways to reduce costs without sacrificing quality. She was so absorbed she didn't notice the time until someone cleared their throat behind her. Ethan stood in the doorway of the now empty office space, his tie loosened, looking as tired as she felt. "You're still here." "So are you. I heard about the contractor. This project doesn't die. I won't let it." He moved to her drafting table, studying what she'd been working on. "What are you thinking?" "That maybe we're using the wrong materials in the wrong places. Everyone focuses on making the visible parts beautiful, the facades and entrances. But what if we inverted that? Used premium, sustainable materials where residents interact with the building daily. Kitchen fixtures, bathroom tiles, flooring. Let the exterior be simpler, cleaner, but the interior is where we invest. People don't live in facades. They live in rooms." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes scanning her notes. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Rick, I know it's late, I need you to run numbers on something. Tomorrow morning, first thing, material reallocation for Brooklyn." He listened, then said, "Because I think we just found our solution." When he hung up, he looked at Sophie with something that might have been admiration. "That's brilliant. Contractors always push premium exteriors because that's what photographs well, what impresses investors. But you're right. The people living there don't care if the building looks impressive from the street. They care if their home feels good. It's just an idea. The numbers might not work. They'll work. We'll make them work." He rubbed his face, exhaustion showing through. "Have you eaten?" "Not since lunch. Come on. There's a diner 2 blocks away that's open late. You can't solve design problems on an empty stomach." Sophie knew she should say no. Knew that accepting dinner invitations from her boss, alone, late at night, was a terrible idea. But she was hungry and exhilarated from the breakthrough, and she wanted more time with him, wanted to understand the man behind the CEO facade. The diner was a classic New York establishment, all chrome and red vinyl, serving breakfast 24 hours a day. They slid into a booth and ordered coffee and food that would absolutely not be heart-healthy. And for the first time, they talked about things that had nothing to do with work. Sophie learned that Ethan had a younger sister who taught elementary school in Boston, that his father had died 2 years ago, that he'd turned down a career in finance to study architecture against his family's wishes. He learned that she'd grown up in a small Oregon town, that her parents owned a bookstore, that she'd known she wanted to design buildings from the moment she'd understood that someone actually made the places people lived. "Did your father ever accept your choice?" Sophie asked, cradling her coffee cup. "Not really. He thought architecture was impractical, that I should focus on the business side. When I insisted on actually designing, not just managing, we fought about it constantly." Ethan stared into his own cup. "Then he had a heart attack in his office, and all those arguments just ended, unresolved. I took over the company, and suddenly everyone was watching to see if I'd fail or become him. Neither option seemed great. You're not him. Anyone paying attention can see that, can they? Sometimes I'm not sure, I'm demanding, I push people, I have impossible standards. But you push them towards something meaningful. That's different." His eyes met hers across the table, and Sophie felt that electric connection again, stronger now. "This doesn't make sense," he said quietly. "What doesn't? This. Us sitting here talking like this. You've worked for me for barely a week. I'm your boss. I should maintain professional distance. That's what's appropriate, what's smart." He leaned forward slightly. "But I can't stop thinking about Friday morning. About you standing on that street, soaking wet, more concerned about your drawings than yourself. About the way you talk about buildings like they're love letters to the people who'll live in them. This doesn't make sense, Sophie." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for someone who prides himself on logic and planning, I'm feeling something completely illogical and unplanned. And I think you might be feeling it too." Sophie should lie, should shut this down before it started. But she'd never been good at lying, and the truth was written all over her face. "Yes, but that doesn't mean we should act on it. You're the CEO, I just started. This could be a disaster for both of us. It could be. Probably would be." He reached across the table, his hand palm up, offering. "But love never made sense, and that's why it's real. The logical part of me says run. The rest of me says that I haven't felt this alive in years, and maybe that's worth the risk. Love," the word caught in her throat, "that's moving fast. I know, too fast. Impossible even. But I'm 32 years old, Sophie. I've dated plenty. Nice women, smart women, appropriate women. I've never felt what I felt when I was picking up your drawings from that street. Like I needed to protect not just you, but what you'd created. Like I'd found something I didn't know I'd been looking for. Sophie stared at his offered hand, her mind racing. This was crazy, absolutely insane. She'd know him for days. He was her boss. Every rational part of her screamed that this was a mistake. But she'd spent her whole life being rational, being careful, making safe choices. And where had it gotten her? Alone in a new city, eating dinner by herself, sketching buildings but never quite living in the world she was trying to design. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain. This might be the worst decision either of us ever makes. Probably. Definitely. But she was smiling. So what do we do? Honestly, I have no idea. I've never mixed work and personal life before, never wanted to. He rubbed his thumb across her knuckles, the touch sending shivers up her arm. But I'm not willing to walk away from this, from you. So we figure it out, carefully. We keep it professional at work. Outside the office, we see where this goes. And if it doesn't work out, then we handle it like adults. No drama, no making it weird for the team. But Sophie, I'm not planning for it not to work out. They left the diner hand in hand, walking the 2 blocks back to the office building in comfortable silence. At the subway entrance where they'd part ways, Ethan pulled her close, his hand cupping her face. "Can I kiss you?" Instead of answering, Sophie rose on her toes and closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them aware they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Then it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sophie felt like her entire world had recalibrated. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, this is happening. This is happening." He kissed her forehead, tender and sweet. "Get home safe. Text me when you're there. You want my number?" "I've had your number since you interviewed. I've been very professional about not using it." His eyes crinkled with humor. "But I'm done being that professional." The next few weeks were the most exhilarating and terrifying of Sophie's life. At work, they maintained careful boundaries. She called him Mr. Hunt in meetings. He treated her no differently than any other team member, offering the same challenging questions and high standards. But in the evenings, they explored the city together. Ethan showed her his New York, the places that mattered to him. The public housing project where he'd grown up, now slated for renovation. The small Italian restaurant where his mother had worked weekends to make ends meet. The boxing gym where he still trained, introducing Sophie to his coach with a pride that made her heart swell. Sophie showed him her New York, the one she was building from scratch. The tiny bookstore in the village that reminded her of home. The waterfront park where she sketched on weekends. The rooftop bar where she'd gone alone her first night in the city, terrified and exhilarated by the leap she'd taken. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Ethan was funny when he relaxed, with a dry wit that caught her off guard. He was also vulnerable in ways she suspected few people saw, sharing his fears about living up to his own expectations, about proving himself worthy of the company he'd inherited. "Sometimes I wake up convinced it's all going to fall apart," he admitted one night, lying on her couch while Maya was out. "That I'll make one wrong decision and everything I've built will collapse. That's not going to happen. You're too careful, too thoughtful." Sophie ran her fingers through his hair, marveling that she had the right to touch him like this. "But even if something did go wrong, you'd handle it. You always do." "How do you know?" "Because you picked up my drawings from the street instead of just driving away. That's who you are. Someone who stops and fixes things, even when it's inconvenient." He pulled her down beside him, kissing her slowly. "You see me differently than most people do. I see you the way you actually are." At work, the Brooklyn project moved forward with Sophie's material reallocation plan. The numbers worked even better than expected, and they found a contractor excited about the innovative approach. Patricia noticed Sophie's growing confidence, giving her more responsibility, letting her lead presentations. She was good at this, Sophie realized. She'd always known she was talented. But here, pushed by Ethan's standards and supported by the team, she was becoming exceptional. 2 months into their relationship, Ethan invited her to Sunday dinner with his sister. Emma Hunt arrived from Boston with her husband and 7-year-old daughter, and immediately subjected Sophie to friendly but thorough scrutiny. "So you're the architect my brother won't shut up about," Emma said, her eyes twinkling with mischief that looked like Ethan's smile. "I talk about lots of architects," Ethan protested. "No, you talk about buildings, but you talk about Sophie." Emma leaned in conspiratorially. "He called me at midnight last week just to tell me about some courtyard design you'd come up with." Midnight. "My brother, who thinks emotions are inefficient, called me in the middle of the night to gush about your work." Sophie glanced at Ethan, who had the grace to look embarrassed. "It was a good design." "It was 11:30, not midnight," he muttered. "Dinner was chaotic in the best way." Emma's daughter, Claire, climbed all over Ethan, who transformed from serious CEO to playful uncle with startling ease. He helped Claire build elaborate towers from blocks, then pretended to be a monster attacking the city, his growls making the little girl shriek with laughter. "He's good with kids," Sophie observed, helping Emma with dishes. "He always has been. Our dad wasn't around much emotionally, but Ethan stepped up. He's the one who taught me to ride a bike, helped with homework, scared off my terrible boyfriend in high school." Emma dried a plate, watching her brother through the kitchen doorway. "He deserves to be happy. He's spent so much of his life taking care of everyone else, proving himself, building that company into something good. I'm glad he found you. I'm glad I found him too. Even if it started with him almost running me over. That story gets better every time I hear it." Emma grinned. "But that's Ethan. Even his meet cute is dramatic and slightly disastrous." Later, walking Sophie home through the cool autumn evening, Ethan pulled her close. "Emma likes you." "How can you tell?" she told me, several times, while you were helping Claire color. "Emma pulled me aside and said, and I quote, 'If you screw this up, I will personally kick your ass.'" Sophie laughed. "I like her too, your whole family, what I've seen of it. It's a small family now. Just me and Emma and her crew, but it's good." He stopped walking, turning to face her on the quiet street. "Sophie, I need to tell you something." Her heart jumped. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least I hope it's not." He took her hands in his. "The board meeting is next week. We're presenting the Brooklyn project for final approval and funding. They're going to ask about the design team, and I'm going to credit you. Your material reallocation strategy is what made this viable. You deserve recognition." "Okay, that's good news. Why do you look worried?" "Because once they know you're crucial to the project, once your name is on presentations and in board minutes, we can't hide this anymore, us. They'll start asking questions, doing that math, and we'll have to be honest." Sophie's stomach tightened. "Will they make me leave?" "No, absolutely not. You're too valuable and you haven't done anything wrong. But they might suggest I recuse myself from your direct supervision, might restructure reporting so there's no conflict of interest." He cupped her face. "I'm not letting you go, Sophie, the job or the relationship. But I need to know you're ready for people to know." She thought about it, really thought. Yes, there would be gossip. People would assume she'd gotten ahead through their relationship, never mind that she'd earned every bit of recognition. It would be uncomfortable and complicated. But she looked at Ethan, at this man who'd shown her his whole self, who supported her work and challenged her to be better, who'd let her into his small, precious family. This wasn't a mistake. This was real. "I'm ready. Let them know." The board meeting was intense. Sophie presented the Brooklyn project alongside Patricia and Ethan, walking the board members through every design decision, every cost calculation. They asked hard questions, and she answered with confidence, backed by months of detailed work. When the vote came, it was unanimous approval. Afterward, Ethan requested time with the board privately. Sophie waited outside the conference room, nervous despite everything. When the door finally opened 40 minutes later, Ethan emerged looking relieved. "How bad?" she asked. "Not bad at all. They're moving you to report to Patricia instead of having any direct line to me. Clean reporting structure, no conflict. And they want to send out a company-wide email about workplace relationships, making sure everyone knows the policy. Professional but not punitive." He kissed her forehead, not caring that they were in the office hallway. "We're good." The email went out that afternoon, neutral and professional, outlining that any workplace relationships should be disclosed to HR to ensure no conflicts of interest. It didn't name them specifically, but the timing made it obvious. Sophie braced for awkwardness, but the team's reaction surprised her. Patricia hugged her. The other architects offered congratulations that seemed genuine. Even the administrative staff smiled knowingly. "We all figured it out weeks ago," one of the junior architects told her. "The way you two looked at each other in meetings wasn't exactly subtle." Apparently, they'd been less discreet than they thought. That evening, Ethan took her to dinner at the Italian restaurant his mother had worked at, a small family place in Brooklyn with red checkered tablecloths and incredible pasta. The owner, an elderly man named Sal, greeted Ethan like family. "This is Sophie," Ethan introduced her. "She's important." Sal studied her with sharp eyes, then nodded approvingly. "Good. You need important people in your life. Your mama, she'd like this one. Smart eyes." They ate too much and drank wine and talked about the Brooklyn project breaking ground in the spring, about Sophie's ideas for future developments, about the life they were building together, brick by brick, moment by moment. "Move in with me," Ethan said suddenly in the middle of dessert. Sophie set down her fork. "What? Move in with me? I know it's fast, we've been together 4 months, but I wake up every morning wishing you were there. I want to have coffee with you and argue about building designs over breakfast and fall asleep next to you every night." He reached across the table. "My place is bigger than your apartment. You can have a whole room for drafting if you want. But mostly I just want you there because that's where you should be, with me." "That is fast. I know, tell me I'm crazy, tell me to slow down." Sophie thought about her tiny apartment that she shared with Maya. About coming home to an empty room, about how the best parts of her days were the moments with Ethan. About how this still didn't make complete sense, but maybe that was okay. Maybe the best things never did. "I'm not going to tell you to slow down. I'm going to tell you yes." His face broke into the most genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. "Yes. Yes. I'll move in with you, Ethan Hunt. We'll have breakfast arguments and coffee together and build something crazy and real." They moved her stuff the following weekend, Emma and her husband driving down from Boston to help. Ethan's apartment was in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and high ceilings, with enormous windows overlooking the city. It was beautiful and slightly impersonal, decorated like a magazine spread. Within hours, Sophie's things started changing that. Her sketches on the walls, her books on the shelves, her presence making it feel like a home instead of a showplace. That night, lying in bed together in what was now their bedroom, Ethan held her close. "Thank you for moving in, for taking a chance on me, on this. I know I'm not easy, I work too much. I get obsessive about projects, I have trouble letting go of control. I work too much too. I get obsessive about designs, and I'm stubborn about my ideas." She kissed his jaw. We're a matched set of workaholics with strong opinions, but I love you exactly as you are. I love you too." He said it like it still surprised him. "I didn't think this was possible for me. Didn't think I had room in my life for another person. But you fit. You make sense when nothing else does." The Brooklyn project broke ground in March, 6 months after Sophie had started at Hunt Architectural Development. The entire team attended the ceremony, along with local officials and future residents who'd been involved in the design process. Ethan gave a speech about creating homes, not housing, about architecture serving people instead of egos. And when he thanked the design team, he looked directly at Sophie. This project wouldn't exist without innovative thinking and dedication to the vision. Thank you to everyone who believed we could do something different. Later, standing at the edge of the construction site, Sophie looked at the empty lot that would soon be filled with homes and life and community. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I can't wait to see this finished. To see kids playing in those courtyards and families looking out those kitchen windows. To know we made something that matters. We did. You did. This is as much yours as mine." She leaned back against him, watching the sunset paint the city gold. "Remember that first day? When you said you forgot you don't own everything? I was having a bad morning, taking it out on the world through aggressive driving, and I walked right in front of your car and changed everything. You did. Completely." He turned her around to face him. "Sophie James, this still doesn't make sense. We're too young to be this serious, too busy to make this work, too different in too many ways. Are you breaking up with me at our construction site?" she asked, amused. "I'm asking you to marry me." Time stopped. The city noise faded. Sophie stared at Ethan, at this man who'd crashed into her life and changed everything, who'd shown her what it meant to build something real, both in architecture and in love. "That's extremely illogical," she managed. "Love never made sense. That's why it's real." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple, perfect ring. "I don't have a speech prepared. I don't have a logical argument for why this makes sense. I just know that I want to build a life with you, design our future together, make a home that's ours." "Sophie, will you marry me?" She was crying, laughing, nodding all at once. "Yes. Yes, that makes absolutely no sense and I don't care. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like everything else about them, impossible and right. They kissed there on the Brooklyn construction site while the sun set over the city. Two architects who'd found each other in the chaos and decided to build something permanent. The wedding was in the fall, a year and a half after Sophie had walked in front of that Ferrari. They got married in the courtyard of the now completed Brooklyn housing project, surrounded by family and friends and the residents who'd made the building a home. Emma was Sophie's maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. Patricia officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. "I've watched these two design buildings together," Patricia said in her speech. "They argue about every detail, push each other to think bigger, refuse to settle for less than perfect. Today, they're designing their biggest project yet, a life together. And knowing them, it's going to be extraordinary." Ethan's vows made everyone cry. "Sophie, you walked into my life soaking wet and completely fearless, and you've been challenging me to be better ever since. You taught me that buildings should serve people, that architecture is about love, that the best designs come from caring about who's going to live in the spaces we create. You've made me a better architect, a better man, a better human. I promise to spend the rest of my life building a home with you, whatever that looks like, wherever that takes us." Sophie's vows were simpler. "Ethan, you told me that love never made sense and that's why it's real. I think about that all the time, how we met in the most ridiculous way, how we fell for each other despite every logical reason not to, how we've built something impossible and perfect. I love you not despite the intensity and the impossible standards and the workaholic tendencies, but because of them. You're exactly who you should be, and I promise to stand beside you, designing our life together, one imperfect, beautiful moment at a time. They danced under string lights in the courtyard they'd designed, surrounded by the homes they'd created. Sal's restaurant catered, filling the evening with the smells of Sophie's first dinner with Ethan's family. Emma gave a toast that had everyone laughing about Ethan's midnight phone calls and obvious smittenness. Maya reminded everyone that she'd known from the first day that something special was happening. As the night wound down, Ethan and Sophie stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching their guests mingle and their building stand strong against the night sky. Did we actually pull this off? Sophie asked, leaning against her husband. The building or the wedding? Both, all of it, we did. Against all odds and logic, we did. He kissed the top of her head. What's next for us, Mrs. Hunt? Actually, I'm keeping James professionally. But I like the sound of Sophie James Hunt for everything else. She turned in his arms. As for what's next, I have some ideas. There's a project in Queens that could use our approach, and I've been thinking about expanding our model to other cities. Also, maybe in a year or two, we could think about starting a family. Ethan's eyes lit up. A family? You're good with Claire, I've seen you. And I think we could design a pretty good childhood. Nothing perfect, but real. Full of love and challenge and buildings that matter. I like that plan. All of it. He held her close, swaying gently even though the music had stopped. This life we're building, it's better than anything I could have designed alone. Good thing you're not alone anymore. They stayed there, holding each other in the courtyard they'd created, surrounded by homes filled with families and love. Somewhere above them, a kitchen light turned on, someone beginning their evening routine in a space designed with care. Sophie smiled against Ethan's chest, thinking about all the windows they'd designed, all the homes they'd create, all the lives they'd touch through their work. But mostly, she thought about how none of it would have happened if she hadn't stepped into that street, if he hadn't stopped his car, if they hadn't taken a chance on something that made absolutely no logical sense. Sometimes the best things in life were the ones that defied explanation. The connections that shouldn't work, but did. The love that arrived in chaos and became foundation. The man who picked up your drawings from the wet street and ended up being everything you didn't know you needed. 3 years later, Sophie stood in another courtyard, this one in Philadelphia, holding her 10-month-old daughter while Ethan finalized details with the construction foreman. They'd expanded their model to 4 cities now, each project bringing affordable, beautiful housing to communities that needed it. Sophie had won awards for her sustainable design work. Ethan had been featured in architectural magazines as a CEO who actually cared about impact over profit. But the best part was this. Coming to sites together, baby Emma strapped to one of them, working side by side to create homes. They'd figured out the balance mostly. Some weeks were harder than others, juggling work and parenting and marriage, but they'd built something solid, something real. Ready to go home? Ethan asked, joining her at the courtyard's edge. Where's home this week? New York. Our actual apartment. I promised Emma we'd take her to the park this weekend, and I promised you I'd actually take 2 days off. I'll believe that when I see it. I'm serious. 2 full days. No work calls, just us and our daughter and the city. He took baby Emma from Sophie's arms, and their daughter immediately grabbed his nose, giggling. Besides, I need time to convince you to marry me again. We're already married. I know, but I want to do it again. Renew our vows. Big party, all our favorite people, another excuse to tell everyone how much I love you. Sophie laughed, shaking her head at this man who still surprised her. You're ridiculous. You love me anyway, I really do, it still doesn't make sense. Good. Ethan kissed her, careful not to squish their daughter between them. If it started making sense, I'd worry we were doing it wrong. They walked to the car together, a small family built on impossible choices and illogical love. Behind them, the Philadelphia project stood half-finished, another set of homes taking shape. Ahead of them, New York waited, with their own home and the life they were still designing together. Sophie looked at her husband, at their daughter, at the buildings they'd created and the future still unfolding. This didn't make sense, she thought, but it was real, it was theirs, and that was everything.